We have finally solved what the One Piece treasure is, and it's been hidden in plain sight since the Fishman Island arc. In this video, we'll be revealing exactly what Joy Boy left behind at Laugh-To. For years, I've had one goal, solving the ultimate One Piece mystery. What is the One Piece? And I had almost given up all hope on solving it, but that's when I accidentally came across the missing puzzle piece. What if I told you there are two locations in the One Piece world, and when you put them together, they reveal the One Piece treasure? You see, Adam and Eve together form a very famous and important pairing, a reference from the Bible. But did you know there's also a Adam and Eve in One Piece? The two most famous trees in the series, Treasure Tree Adam and Sunlight Tree Eve. And as I was rereading the Fishman Island arc, Usopp even jokes and says, I wonder if the Sunlight Eve tree has a connection to the Adam tree which created the Sunny. And this was how I began to think Usopp is right. These trees are a pair, so what if we put them together? Not only Adam and Eve, but their other names. Adam and Eve, Treasure and Sunlight, Sunlight Treasure, the One Piece treasure, Sun God Nika. Wait, that's it. The One Piece treasure left behind by Joy Boy is the sun. My mind began racing so fast, and I immediately thought back to my favorite YouTuber, Tekking101, who once said in his legendary tree video that trees may be the key to solving the Void Century. I began shouting, he was right. Tekking was actually right. So today I'm taking you on this journey with me as we dive into the Adam and Eve trees, and I'll be explaining exactly what the One Piece is, and by the end you'll understand why the One Piece being the sun is true in more than just one way. But before we begin, I need two huge favors. First, make sure you like the video. Our goal is 10,000 likes. And second, share this video with everyone you know in the One Piece community, and if you do these two things, we can really get this theory to everyone out there. Alright, so the best place to start is why trees? Why did Oda choose trees to hide the secrets of the One Piece treasure? The truth is, in One Piece, iconic trees have become symbolic of mysteries and important ancient knowledge, which makes sense because trees for years have also signified knowledge and the ancient life in our own world. We've seen a whale tree in Zou, which had a road poneglyph and was home to Zunisha and the Minks, who were once allies of the Kozuki and Joy Boy. Then there's Ohara's knowledge tree, which was the oldest tree ever and had knowledge and information that allowed people to learn how to read poneglyphs and solve the world's biggest trees. And I think the Ohara tree also has some very important keys and clues to some other mysteries, so subscribe for that video. I'll be making a video on the Ohara tree another time. Then we also have the sacred Rusukaina tree, a tree which was on the island that Luffy and Rayleigh stayed on for 2 years. And that tree was special for being safe as the only place on the island that animals would avoid. And then of course we have Adam and Eve trees, which we'll be talking about today. And so you'll start to notice that these trees represent ideas like wisdom, divine powers, spirituality, and ancient worship. I mean, even back in Skypiea, we saw a scene where we find out the Shandians worship trees, paying respects to their ancestors and spirits. They worship these trees as a godly force, and maybe this was foreshadowing to just how important the other trees in the One Piece world would be. Another connection that all trees have is to the sun, a godly important figure of the ancient kingdom, which we'll get into soon enough. Since trees are linked to the sun through photosynthesis, you can start to see why they become such big symbols for the ancient kingdom and why they're tied to worship. Now that we understand why Oda chose trees to hold many mystical secrets to the One Piece world, let's start by diving into our first iconic tree that solves the One Piece treasure and many other mysteries, the Sunlight Tree Eve. Alright, so what if I told you that solving the mysterious origins of the Sunlight Eve tree revealed to us the story of the lost history of the ancient kingdom and their final days right before the civilization was completely wiped out? In chapter 612, during the Fishman Island arc, Nami begins a conversation with King Neptune, where she asks about the giant Sunlight Tree Eve. She says, by the way, Grandpa, we're 30,000 feet under the sea. Why is it so bright where Fishman Island is? Neptune replies stating that it's not bright because we're here. Instead, this is the only place in the world where light reaches the ocean floor, which is why the ancient ancestors of the fishmen decided to live here. That is the secret of Fishman Island. And it's almost like the whole world doesn't understand this truth, and they assume, like Nami, that the fishmen somehow created all this light under the ocean with their own kind of powers or technology. But if this truly remains a secret, it means that their entire existence, the origins and importance of the Sunlight Eve tree, and maybe even Fishman Island itself could even remain a mystery to the Celestial Dragon, which is actually very possible because even now, the Celestial Dragons and the world government don't go down to Fishman Island because it is notoriously difficult and dangerous to reach, with only 30% of ships surviving the journey. And now imagine a time when no one even knew how to find the island during the early years after the Void Century, and that no one even knew it existed. So if this is such a well-kept secret, it makes you wonder, was this tree created during the end of the Void Century, specifically for the fishmen who were past allies of the Ancient Kingdom and Joy Boy to live in secrecy until they would eventually return to the surface one day. All of this is very interesting because it would be as if the fishmen and mermaids were truly a mystical race of people for centuries after the Void Century until they'd be rediscovered by the world hundreds of years later. Legends would grow of the fishmen people for years as they remained under the ocean, until eventually a few fishmen would wander to the surface world and explore the world above them for pure curiosity. And kind of like how people treat mermaids in our real world as nothing but pure speculation and fictional stories, this was most likely how the fishmen existed before they came to the surface. In previous videos, I discussed how I believe the Lunarians and Onis went basically extinct during the Void Century War. I'll leave a link to that video in the description, but the reason I bring it up is because in that video I also spoke about how the fishmen were another group of celestial dragons who they were going to target next, similar to the Lunarians. The fishmen were confirmed allies of Joy Boy, and if you think about it, there's not that many fishmen in the world compared to humans, so it's possible that the celestial dragons had already launched an attack on them, and with Joy Boy witnessing the tragic downfall of the Lunarians and the Oni race, his goal was to protect and save the next target of the Grand War, and decided to build the Sunlight Eve Tree to hide the fishmen from the world during the remaining final years of the war under the depths of the sea, where they could rebuild their culture and population in secrecy, at least until he could defeat the celestial dragons and then bring them back up to the surface. Now remember all of this because it's going to be very important again later in the video. So yes, I believe Sunlight Eve Tree is an artificially enhanced creation specifically created for the Fishman people, and you might still be skeptical, so let me show you even more evidence. In chapter 906, when Shirahoshi and Neptune first visit Marijua for the Reverie, it's revealed that the green forest of Marijua is an artificially man-made one. And because I remember this little detail, this is really where the entire theory just became a lot bigger. I believe a former user of Green Bull's forest fruit created the artificial forest in the past when Marijua was created at the end of the Void Century for two big reasons. First, we've seen Green Bull be able to bring back plant life even in the wastelands like Wano, so we know he has the ability to do this. And two, because similar to Luffy inheriting the will of Joy Boy, Green Bull is someone who worships and fully buys into the celestial dragons and their ways of propaganda. So maybe an ancient user of the forest fruit was similar in ideals to Green Bull, creating the forest as an act of worship. We even saw Green Bull very protective over Marijua, to the point where he fought Fujitora at the Reverie for wrecking the place. And so maybe Green Bull is very protective because he also maintains the artificial forest and plant life. And that'd be pretty funny, you know, Twerk Bull being a part-time admiral, part-time gardener. And then the final reason why I think the forest fruit created the forest at Marijua is because if the Lunarians once lived on the Red Line, or maybe where Marijua was originally, that means they could have destroyed the entire land where they once lived, and so there was nothing there. It was all ruins like Wano, and so the forest fruit was able to restore the plant life. But really, regardless of how this forest was created, the fact that it's not a natural phenomena is the first clue that shows that some trees during the ancient times were intentionally and artificially created, or at the very least enhanced in some way. And so is it a coincidence that Shirahoshi and Neptune are the ones being told about this artificial fruit, when Neptune is the one who explained the other artificial enhanced Sunlight Eve Tree to Nami? Now let's go back to Nami and Neptune. King Neptune goes on to explain more about the Sunlight Eve Tree and its secrets. He says how the roots of the giant Sun Tree Eve reach Fishman Island and bring the light from the surface down to them. Nami replies with, "Sun Tree? You mean there's a tree that can transfer light 30,000 feet underwater?" Neptune replies saying, "Correct, the scientists have some complicated theories about it, but in essence it's a mystical tree that emits light from the surface, and its roots even breathe, allowing us to get air from the surface as well." You see, the way that the Sun Tree works and is explained by King Neptune, it appears that the Sunlight Eve Tree is a magical or mystical tree, to even the fishmen and their scientists as well. But oftentimes magic or mystical objects are just highly advanced, technologically enhanced tools and powers. For example, take a cell phone. If you brought a person from the year 1645 into our current world and showed them a cell phone with the power to FaceTime someone across the world, they'd think this was some kind of magical weapon or tool. They'd probably freak out and think that you're doing some form of Salem witchcraft. And so when you really break down what Neptune's explaining here to Nami, I believe this giant tree is a massive genetically modified solar tool. A tree with solar energy-like capabilities, just like solar panels sucking up the sun during the day and then saving this energy for later on at night to use it as lights. The only difference here is that the Sunlight Eve Tree's solar energy corresponds with the sun during the day. So instead of being controlled and saved for the night, it's being used instantly at full force all day day to light up the bottom of the darkest places and give them a day and night sequence the same way it is above the ocean. So now I'll ask you again, is this really just a natural phenomena of the incredible One Piece world, or is the Sunlight Eve tree specifically designed this way? Another possibility is that the Sunlight Eve tree is an artificial tree created by implementing an eternal flame of the ancient past, the same eternal flame that Vegapunk seeks as an unlimited and free resource to be used as free energy one day. And what if I told you that Lilith had already told us what this eternal flame is? Vegapunk says if there was only such thing as an eternal flame, I could create a sun, and this is because the sun's energy is seemingly infinite. While I personally believe that the Sunlight Eve tree's technology is essentially a solar energy transfer due to the day and night cycle, we cannot rule out the possibility that there's a mini sun of endless energy built into this tree, which is designed as an endless power source that allows this tree to function like this for centuries. You guys let me know in the comments which theory is more likely true. In my previous mega theory where we compared One Piece to Esteban, Child of the Sun, we solved the mystery of the downfall of the ancient kingdom in the Void Century, and if you watch that video you'll know just how important the sun is, as well as how there was solar power technology during the glory days of the ancient kingdom. We also talk about the eternal suns that could power entire cities and create solar nukes during the day of the ancient kingdom. Doesn't that remind you of the Mother Flame and the ancient kingdom's mysterious advancements, like maybe the Sunlight Tree Eve? Which means that what made the ancient kingdom such an incredible and liberating place is that really anyone in the entire world would be able to enjoy the abundance of the sun and the incredible things you could do with all this powerful energy. And the tragic part about all of this is that the blessing of the sun's energy may have also been the ancient kingdom's downfall, sending the One Piece world into an apocalyptic state after the giant war, just like an Esteban, Child of the Sun. And if I'm right about there being an even more powerful version of the Mother Flame during the days of the ancient kingdom that was powered by a mini sun, then you can understand why Joy Boy may have died attempting to sacrifice and shield himself for his kingdom, taking on the full blast to redirect it and saving his friends. In Esteban, Child of the Sun, it stated that these giant solar weapons are what wiped out the kingdom, sinking everything to the bottom of the ocean. And this sounds very similar to what we're now dealing with in One Piece, as you can see the effects of Leloucia, leaving a gaping hole throughout the bottom of the ocean where Leloucia once existed. For some of us, it may seem impossible to imagine an entire civilization solely reliant on solar energy. It seems like a fantasy, but in theory, it should be possible. The incredible thing about this in One Piece compared to our real world is that for us, a fully powered solar panel reliant household could last up to 25 to 30 years. Meanwhile, the Sunlight Eve tree seems essentially infinite, a tree genetically modified to work paired with the power of the sun. This could mean that in One Piece, solar energy has the potential to last an entire lifetime after its initial creation, and was most likely how it worked at some point during the ancient kingdom's 100-year era. Considering the ancient kingdom's technology had many incredible futuristic sci-fi advancements, the limits on the science of the ancient kingdom's past is limitless. So yeah, I believe the ancient kingdom was running on solar energy at some point until the mini sun technology was created with the Mother Flame. And so this all ties into Vegapunk wanting to create the true freedom by creating a free energy or a sun, and even goes back to the ancient kingdom, because now you understand why they may have worshipped the sun 900 years ago, because the sun itself was such an integral part of their society, which liberated everyone, granting freedom and incredible fun. The sun was the pillar of what made the ancient kingdom such a legendary place, which also makes sense why sun energy represents freedom and why Nika the sun god is the god of freedom, fun, and liberation. There's a good chance Vegapunk knows about the importance of sun energy as he's read all the books from Ohara. He knows about Nika, the ancient kingdom, and their old technology. So while the Mother Flame was an ancient artifact recreated from the old war, we know Vegapunk was the person who helped power up the Mother Flame. The ancient weapon that we see Emu using tied with the Mother Flame all seem to be coming from the ancient kingdom. And this is where things get interesting, because the Mother Flame could be a prototype to the great sun that the ancient kingdom once possessed. In chapter 1014, we can even see the Mother Flame inside this tank of fire, and Merlin points out to me on Twitter that this was how they described the destruction of the ancient kingdom of Mu, which used the ancient kingdom's sun energy to become so prosperous. And what's even crazier is how we see this tank have the phrase A and Mu, which Merlin says could be Atlantis and Mu. We've explained in previous videos that Atlantis and Mu were the two kingdoms at war which destroyed each other using the ancient energy source of the sun at its full power. I'll leave those Mu kingdom videos in the description. Now, I believe the correct theories of Mu being what inspired the entire story of the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom of One Piece is definitely true. And the further we go into One Piece, the more Oda seems to be hinting at this. The entire world has been sunk due to powers like the Mother Flame. And this brings up another interesting question, because did the world government get their hands on this technology? Was there some kind of evil person in the D-Clan or in the Ancient Kingdom that betrayed them? The downfall of the Ancient Kingdom seems still very mysterious, even if we do know the overall force that caused its downfall. Now, going back to the Sun and the Sunlight Eve Tree and Fishman Island, remember I mentioned how the Fishmen at one point were a mythical race of people after the Void Century. They weren't discovered by human society until years later. But hiding Fishman Island at the bottom of the ocean would be a great idea, since now the weapons like the Mother Flame wouldn't be able to target them. And I am planning on releasing a video on how Joy Boy actually lost and how he failed his promise to the Fishmen, so subscribe for that. I'll be dropping that soon. Now, if the Fishmen were really a race who were rumored and theorized to exist in the One Piece world just like our own world for hundreds of years after the Void Century, what I like about this is that it could also explain the racial tension between humans and the Fishmen. We can assume that the Celestial Dragons had problems with them because they were racist people, but also because they were the allies of Joy Boy during the Void Century. But for the everyday human, you can kind of understand how this propaganda against the Fishmen would also work very easily. Like, imagine one day you saw an actual mermaid, or even crazier, a Fishman in real life. As much as I'd like to say I'd be welcoming to my guy Jinbei, I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably be terrified and probably think it's some kind of sea monster alien beast. Hell, I might even end up cooking him for dinner. The thing is, these people always thought they were mythical creatures. They always thought they were rumors and not real. And when you combine that with the propaganda from the Celestial Dragons, this is a recipe for big racism and discrimination. Most people's human reaction is to fear the unknown and fearing things they do not understand. People who live at the bottom of the ocean for hundreds of years, one day coming back to the ocean and trying to implement themselves in normal society. Yeah, that sounds like it could be a disaster for the Fishmen. But the most important thing here is that this time it will be the new Joy Boy and Poseidon, or Luffy and Shirahoshi, the two sovereigns who will fulfill Joy Boy's promise. And once Joy Boy, the god who saves the world, is allied with the Fishmen and Poseidon, it could change everyone's perspective on the Fishmen. Once Luffy does finally help Shirahoshi to fulfill her dream of bringing everyone back up to the earth, humans will have to finally coexist with the Fishmen. This might even fit the prophecy that Luffy could one day destroy Fishman Island, as he could destroy the Red Line, or at least the Sunlight Eve Tree, which could eventually destroy the Red Line, as the Sunlight Eve Tree is speculated by many fans to be growing inside of the Red Line, and maybe even the top of the tree, which we've never seen before. Maybe the top of the tree could be directly below Marijoa, rising through the Red Line. My friend Crow from the OPU podcast mentioned another cool idea to me, where he believes that the flower room that we saw with Emu could connect to the top of the Sunlight Eve Tree, as it's a room that glows very bright, and we can see roots and branches in this room almost like if it's built into the tree. So it would be interesting if during the creation of the world government after Emu conquered the Red Line, they decided to build the Holy Land where Joy Boy had already built his tree, not knowing the importance of the massive Sunlight Eve Tree, or maybe they did know about it and they wanted to hide it from the world. The mere idea of Luffy ripping out the Sunlight Eve Tree while simultaneously breaking into Marijoa from underneath sounds like an absurdly classic Luffy entrance if I've ever heard one. And it would also be a great story for the creation of the previous Joy Boy to be what helps the new Joy Boy fulfill the original Joy Boy's promise, finishing off what he failed to accomplish. And what's even better is that Oda has also set all these pieces in place to happen, because bringing the Fishmen up to the surface is also the dream of the Mermaid Princess of Prophecy, Shirahoshi. In chapter 906, we get an entire scene during the reverie dedicated to Shirahoshi seeing the true sun for the very first time. And even though, yes, Shirahoshi is known for being a crybaby, this was actually a really cool and emotional moment. She says that the light from the seafloor is nothing compared to this. Father, if it can be true, I would love to live on the surface. I want to show everyone in our kingdom this world of sun. As the weapon Poseidon, she will make her dream a reality with her power powers and by allying with Luffy, who breaks her free of her cowardly nature. Because with Joy Boy and Shirahoshi and the fishmen in general connected in this strange form of destiny, and now with Neptune accepting his kingdom under the protection of the Straw Hats, I just can't wait to see how everything plays out. Now let's take the idea that Joy Boy created the Sunlight Eve tree even further, as it's implied that the Sunlight tree is either of the similar family to many of the trees that we see in Sabaody and the Red Port, but a giant version of this. But even crazier is the implication that the entire Sabaody archipelago could be a single branch from the Sunlight Eve tree, a giant mangrove coming from a few clustered twigs and branches from the giant underwater tree, forming the smaller islands above the water. And if that is true, I mean, that just shows you how massive the tree is. It also makes me wonder, what if Joy Boy once became a giant and stretched a smaller Sabaody-like tree into the colossal Sunlight Eve tree we see today? And that could be why these trees have a permanent essence of resin bubbles and rubbery stickiness. One theory I've seen people bring up is that Luffy could unlock a sticky mochi-like Logia power to permanently affect things in a similar way to Kuzan and Sakazuki's ice and lava and Punk Hazard. But Luffy's creating a gooey rubbery texture by stretching things permanently. We already saw a glimpse of this in the battle with Kaido, where he affects the entire battlefield, making it bouncy and bending to his own will. And in his fight with Katakuri, Luffy's devil fruit is directly mirrored to the sticky mochi man. And I'll make sure to leave a link to a video from Daksake where he explains the idea where Luffy will have every single type of devil fruit power from Zone, Paramecia, and Logia. We've even seen Doffy and Katakuri change the area around them, similar to Luffy's awakenings. And going back to mythical zones, we've even seen Kaido create lightning, tornadoes, and flame clouds. And remember, we're talking about the sun god creating these sun trees, so is it really such a stretch? And after Luffy stretched this tree, then you could have had help from the scientists and the ancient kingdom to implement the solar energy genetic enhancements. I'm not saying Luffy has a gooey resin fruit like some people say, but it is possible that resin is a byproduct of the rubbery element of Luffy's awakening that we still have not even seen yet, similar to how heat or fire is a byproduct of a Kainu's magma. And now that we know that Nika has ties to Elbaf from chapter 1144, it really starts to make sense why everything in the past connected to Joy Boy was so massive. The Sunlight Eve tree, Zunisha, the Noah, Poseidon, and so much more. And what's really crazy is that I originally thought of this theory of Nika or Joy Boy creating the Sunlight Eve tree back when Luffy first unlocked Gear 5. But now with Egghead Island arc showing so much scientific importance of the ancient kingdom, I've been able to piece everything together a lot better. The reason I originally thought of this idea was because simply the sun god Nika tree connected to the sun tree, but also because according to the Gorosei, Nika's power was said to be a power of unimaginable creativity, and that was really the first time we started seeing crazy things like Gear 5 and Luffy becoming a giant. And now that we've gone into depth on this Sunlight Eve tree explaining the importance of the sun to the ancient kingdom, we can finally connect the treasure tree atom to the One Piece and explain everything that we're going to see at Laugh Tale and exactly what the One Piece treasure is. But first, make sure to subscribe if you're not already, and make sure to hit that bell notification to never miss a future video. I'm going to make a second part to this video where we continue our research into One Piece trees, but in that next video, we're going to solve the origins of devil fruits. At the end of Nami and Neptune's conversation about the Sunlight Tree Eve, Usopp jokingly makes a pun saying maybe the Sunlight Tree Eve has some kind of connection to the atom tree that Sunny is made of. Usopp is shown taking notes as if to foreshadow that there's definitely a connection between the two trees. On face value, it's simply just a fun joke, but we all know that Oda loves to max blatant foreshadowing in plain sight, especially with Usopp. But if someone told me that this little connection Usopp hints at would be what spirals me into a massive theory to solve the One Piece, I'd just laugh at you. Usopp's implying that they have a connection, but this goes even deeper than anyone could have imagined. Together, Sunlight Tree Eve and Treasure Tree Adam form a biblical reference to the story of Adam and Eve, only reinforcing these two trees as a pair. And considering how important the Bible is in One Piece, especially now thanks to Kuma, this made me genuinely curious to what the importance of this pairing could be. I began to think, if Adam and Eve together already formed a pair, would it be a reach to pair the words treasure and sunlight together as well? And what happens here is that we see Oda has already spelled out to us exactly what the One Piece treasure is. The sun is the treasure that Joy Boy left behind. The sun is the One Piece. And hopefully now you guys can fully understand why. When I first thought of this, my mind was just blown because it got me thinking, what if the One Piece treasure treasure at Laugh-Tale is a giant ancient solar panel, which would be kind of funny, but I really doubt that. So then that means that if Mother Flame is the prototype to the ancient kingdom's full-on sun energy force, that means that at Laugh-Tale we will finally see a true sun, the full vision that Vegapunk has to fulfill his dreams, not just the Mother Flame, but something vastly more powerful. And this brings me to an even better idea, because I believe that an ancient city is the treasure of One Piece as well. To be specific, I believe an entire city is located at Laugh-Tale, and that is the treasure of the One Piece, a final city of full-on treasures on this island that runs on this ancient sun energy source of the past. In my previous videos comparing One Piece to an old anime, Esteban Child of the Sun, I reveal how at the end of that anime, Esteban finds a city of gold that has a futuristic energy source from the ancient power of the sun. Oh, and by the way, that anime also has the Kingdom of Mu, which also has this power source. And so this means that Laugh-Tale will have these futuristic sun-powered weapons and vehicles like an Esteban Child of the Sun, ancient relics that Luffy has to explore. I really believe the name of the ancient kingdom is going to tie to the sun in some way, or maybe not the sun, but instead to Mu. And in both ways, this would tie back to everything. You see, if this ancient island existed, they would still need the power of the sun. And so that's really what makes the sun the treasure, not just this ancient pirate city. As we explained earlier with the Sunlight Tree Eve as an example, the ancient kingdom's treasure was the sun. And so it makes sense that just like an Esteban Child of the Sun, Joy Boy in the ancient kingdom would also leave a city behind, and a city for the future generations to have the most valuable and prosperous treasure of all time. In Esteban Child of the Sun, they passed it on to the children, but in One Piece, it was always meant to be passed on to Joy Boy. Joy Boy, the sun god who was always destined to inherit the sun power and use it to fight against in this war. And one day after the entire war is all said and done versus Emu and Joy Boy, Luffy will use this sun power to create his own pirate kingdom, a kingdom of prosperity, piracy, freedom, and joy, all things connecting to Joy Boy and Vegapunk's dream. And this would also explain why Roger says he's too early, because Luffy is the sun god Nika. Just like Kuma explains, just like Vegapunk knows it, even before Luffy awakened the form, in some ways he was destined. And so was it Luffy's dream or his destiny? I mean, we've been asking that question for so long now. But if you really think about it, the beauty of One Piece's story is that it's both. Luffy's dream is his destiny, and that's what makes Luffy a perfect character as a godly force. Even Roger believed that Luffy, the sun god, or Joy Boy would be the one to find the sun treasure, and to one day bring back the era of the dawn, or in other words, what Roger calls Joy Boy's era. Prince D Professor from our OPU podcast made me realize that one of the biggest videos on this channel was the Laughs Tales video, which explains why Luffy himself is the One Piece, and now this makes even more sense, because Luffy himself is the symbolic and metaphorical sun for the entire world. The One Piece treasure is the sun, and it is so connected to Luffy that therefore Luffy the sun god is as well. Luffy is the one that's already been bringing freedom, light, and hope to the entire world, even without the treasure left behind by Joy Boy. So of course Luffy's the one who should inherit this power, not Blackbeard, who's only going to cause fear, darkness, and chaos. And so maybe Laugh's Tale was really simply the story of Joy Boy, these fantasy sci-fi adventures of the ancient kingdom's solar power dominance, and how the treasure of the sun power actually led to its entire downfall. Or maybe more specifically Joy Boy's tale, as Oda confirmed my age-old theory that Joy Boy was the first pirate king. Well, I guess even more specifically, the first pirate ever. And that's really why Roger cried out both tears of laughter and sadness, and it's so much more meaningful when you also think that Joy Boy was the first pirate king, and then Roger and Luffy are also going to be the next pirate kings as well. Think about a kingdom with free energy and all of the wonderful inventions the sun energy could have brought. And when you have a guy as childish as Joy Boy, it really makes sense to why Roger is so excited to see the new Joy Boy's era. Because remember, Joy Boy and Roger shared the same dream. Roger just wasn't the sun god. Now, another interesting favorite point that Prince brought up to me was that it now makes sense why the One Piece was always foreshadowed to be wealth, fame, and power, all gathered in one place at Laugh-Tale. Because the one person who could harness the full power of the sun and fully utilize the single greatest celestial body in the universe would truly have gained it all. Now, it's also interesting if Luffy being the sun and the sun being the One Piece is also important, because it makes sense why Blackbeard is the ultimate foil to Luffy, because he even tells him that the Yami Yami Nomi is the strongest devil fruit. And so what if Blackbeard actually believes this, because it earned the reputation so many years ago during the 4th century as being the direct counter counter to the sun and the devil fruit that goes directly against the sun, the same sun that the ancient kingdom worshipped. It's possible that Blackbeard's devil fruit was even specifically created for this purpose. I wouldn't even be surprised if Blackbeard's devil fruit is also a mythical Zoan. And now with it being implied that Nika goes even further beyond the Void Century, a god of Elbaf from even before the days of Joy Boy, there could be a really cool origin story here for the original sun god Nika and his greatest enemy, this kind of devil or demon that embodies all darkness and eventually became the Yami Yami no Mi. Blackbeard even points out how he and Ace were destined to clash because of the contrasting light and darkness in their fruits. And while Ace is fighting him, we even see him create a small sun. Now I want to make an entire video on Blackbeard, so maybe I'll do it. Just let me know in the comments if you want that. I want to talk about his potential powers, his devil fruit, and so much more. But I'll leave you with this. I am so confident that Blackbeard will be the final villain of One Piece, because with his goal of conquering the entire world now finally being confirmed, I believe that one of his own godly feats will be to consume the entire world in an endless darkness by creating a solar eclipse. And of course, Luffy, the sun god, will be the only person who could shine a light in that darkness and rival that. Alright, so this entire One Piece treasure theory is already crazy enough. We have Laugh-Tale, an island with an ancient city that was passed down and saved and hidden by Joy Boy, a city with an energy source of the sun. But what if I told you that I have evidence that proves that Oda planned this from the very beginning of One Piece? You see, after rereading the Orangetown arc, I realized this arc has very subtle but important details, and it focuses on one very important theme. It asks maybe the most important question in this entire theory, because we're talking about what is a treasure. And in Orangetown we get many different answers for what a treasure is, but guess what? They all connect to what the One Piece is. We get one perspective from Luffy, we get one perspective from Chow Chow, our favorite dog, we get one perspective from the mayor of Orangetown, and even Buggy the Clown. And when I combined each and every one of these, I was shocked. Chapter 13 is titled Treasure, and it's the chapter where we find our favorite dog Chow Chow is defending his treasure, the store of his owner who had passed, protecting this store's legacy and history even years later. And so you may be wondering, why is this important? But it's important because it shows us the ending of the Void Century. I believe that Joy Boy died protecting Laugh-Tale, an island with a city that was home to his friends of the ancient kingdom. And like we mentioned earlier, this was a city of pirates and treasure. And so Joy Boy may have sacrificed himself to protect the history of his kingdom at all costs, even though they'd already perished. And this is very similar to what we hear with Nico Robin when she explains that this happened to Shandora as well, protecting a city of treasure, the city of gold. And maybe Joy Boy died protecting the treasure, but then the Kozukis, the Minks, and maybe other of Joy Boy's former allies did die protecting Laugh-Tale even years after he died. Now the bigger idea here is that a treasure, while yes, it has some very materialistic, tangible aspects to it like the solar weapons, the cool vehicles, and of course pure jewels, treasury, and pirate riches, Oda has also been teasing us since the very beginning that the One Piece treasure is going to be something so symbolic of the ancient kingdom, something that carries on their memories, something very meaningful to the overall story of One Piece. And that brings us to our next perspective, because in this arc we also see Luffy call his straw hat his treasure, once again evidence that Luffy, the sun god, yeah, he is the treasure of the One Piece, or at least so heavily connected to it. Nami witnesses just how valuable Luffy's straw hat is to him, which he calls his treasure, a very symbolic treasure that carries on the will of Roger, Shanks, and even Joy Boy. And why this is tied to the One Piece is because Laugh-Tale is so tied to Joy Boy. You see, Luffy is Straw Hat Luffy, that's in his own name, so in a way he's saying Straw Hat is the One Piece treasure. Luffy is also the symbolic son of the ancient kingdom, returning because he is the sun god Nika and this new era's Joy Boy. Alright, so now we can see how Luffy's Straw Hat treasure explains how he is the sun or the One Piece itself. And we also now see how the One Piece or Laugh-Tale has a place that Joy Boy or his friends protected, which is why Laugh-Tale is so well hidden and why the poneglyphs were created. But the mayor and Buggy's ideas of what a true treasure is are the real nail in the coffin to prove exactly what the One Piece is. Now what really really blows my mind here is in chapter 15. This chapter is where the mayor of Orangetown finally gets the courage to charge ahead and fight against Buggy to stand up for his people and protect his treasure. And while confronting Buggy, these two characters have a very interesting conversation about what a treasure even is. The mayor tells Buggy he's here to challenge Buggy and protect his treasure, which he spent so long building up from nothing. The mayor had seen the town since it started, and he saw it prosper from a small community to a town that thrives. And he even got to witness the tragic downfall. But even after Buggy and his crew destroyed most of Orangetown, the mayor had so much passion still for the love of the town. Buggy laughs at the mayor's treasure, which is Orangetown, and he says that it can't be a treasure. Buggy says that treasure is simply piratey gold and jewels. So who's really in the right here? Well, what if I told you that they're both right? What if both their interpretations of a treasure reveal hints to what the One Piece treasure will be when we finally get to Laugh Tale? What if the One Piece treasure is both an ancient home, a lost city of the ancient kingdom, but not just any city, a pirate city filled with treasure, gold, and prosperity, a city filled with ancient treasures, a city filled with lost technology and lost culture, a perfect combination of all of these theories, a perfect combination of all these different ideas of a treasure. And so similar to how the mayor's treasure is the town, Joy Boy's treasure was what he left behind, a city or a town from his kingdom. And we know Buggy's also right about there being riches and treasure and gold and jewels, because the ancient kingdom was a prosperous kingdom. Joy Boy was a legendary pirate, probably the pirate king of his era. And if the city really is a city of golds and jewels, as we know from the Esteban City of Gold theory, then Buggy is definitely right here. And this also really makes a lot of sense because for One Piece being this huge story of a pirate adventure, you do expect to see a lot of different kinds of gold and jewels, and I would be kind of disappointed and sad for Nami if that wasn't there. And truthfully, the combination of all of this would make a perfect ending to One Piece. And that's what I love so much about the Orangetown arc and the mayor and Buggy's debate about what a treasure is. I love this too because it shows that Oda had been planning this since the very beginning. And yeah, it is kind of crazy to think that this type of foreshadowing will go all the way back to one of the first arcs in One Piece. But I like to think that Oda definitely had the ending planned. He definitely had some kind of idea for what the One Piece would be. And if he really was inspired by Esteban, Child of the Sun, it being a lost pirate city of an ancient kingdom with a bunch of treasure and gold, ancient technology, that does sound like a very reasonable theory. And also I find it very interesting that Oda chose to title this chapter Gong, because a gong is a type of Asian drum, another connection to Luffy with the drums of liberation and the mayor fighting for the liberation of his town. Okay, so now the most important thing about Luffy being the sun and the sun also being the One Piece is how symbolically Luffy could embody this power once he discovers it. What if Luffy's true power at the end of the series will be something similar to what the power of the sun energy source of the ancient kingdom has? And this would also make a lot of sense when you think about how Luffy can create a fire punch after mimicking Ace. This power never made any sense to me and it hasn't been explained by Oda. So maybe the sun god Nikafru has a power where you can take the energy from the sun and use it in your own attacks. This would be really cool because we know that Blackbeard has multiple devil fruits, the darkness and quake fruits. Luffy only has one fruit, but now he has two powers from this one fruit, being stretchy rubber and Luffy's final form being the use of light beams and fire sun type attacks. It would be really cool to see Luffy glowing like the sun with a bright orange or yellow aura. We even saw a color page where Oda draws Luffy with his head and fists on fire, maybe foreshadowing this form, maybe a mastery of Gear 5. And I've had this idea in my mind where maybe one day Luffy could bounce back the Mother Flame light beams with his rubber like he did to Kaido's blast breath. But could you imagine how powerful Luffy be if he could also shoot explosive light beams out of his own body? This would make Luffy the ultimate warrior and give him a godly feat similar to someone like Blackbeard. In fact, Luffy may even awaken this power when he fights Blackbeard. If Blackbeard turns the entire world into an eternal darkness, maybe he does a solar eclipse making the entire world dark. And then Luffy awakens this form and shoots light into the entire sky, bringing back the light to the world and bringing back hope to everyone. Now, if we can use Adam and Eve to figure out what the One Piece treasure is, why stop here? What if these two trees could also tell us where the One Piece treasure is? What if the location of Laugh Tale is a location where the Adam tree and the Sunlight Eve tree intersect? Because these trees are presumably both gigantic trees with branches that could possibly span over the entire world. So what if there's a location in the One Piece world where their roots reach out and link to Laugh Tale? Or maybe a place where their branches meet, which would be really cool because it would give Laugh Tale a glowing golden aura. The treasure glimmering with the sunlight would be a perfect combo, and that would really make Laugh Tale one of the most beautiful beautiful islands. So let me know in the comments, do you believe this theory? And now it's time to talk about the treasure tree atom and why it's connected to Elbaf and the Sky Islands. But first, a ton of work goes into these videos, especially these huge One Piece theory videos. So consider helping us by dropping a super thank donation in the comments if you appreciate our work. And maybe one day we'll even achieve our dream of going full-time on YouTube. So the atom tree is called the jewel tree in the Viz translation, but the more exact translation in Japanese is the treasure tree atom, which already shows it's valuable and important, especially in a series about pirates. In chapter 431, Frankie explains to us what the atom tree is for the very first time. He says, far away there's a war-torn island, and on that island there's a tree. Whether the people on that island fight wars and rain cannonballs from the sky, or whether they all die and their buildings turn into ruins, the tree always remains. It's a special tree. It can't be chopped down. People gather around it and create nations. There are only a few trees like that in existence. That strongest tree in existence is the jewel tree atom. This implies it's almost impossible to destroy the giant legendary trees like the Sunlight Eve tree and the atom tree. My friend Sake believes Luffy or the Straw Hats could destroy the atom tree and Ragnarok will commence with the tree's destruction as a symbol of the legendary war. But I thought of another interesting idea. What if Blackbeard is the one who parallels Luffy in the destruction of the trees? Luffy destroys the Sunlight Eve tree and Blackbeard destroys the atom tree. Blackbeard's character fits here as a character of symbolic chaos and destruction, of course being symbolized by his two devil fruits. And we know that Shanks and Blackbeard have to clash eventually, so Shanks is tied to Elbaf and Blackbeard doing this would definitely make them have to fight. Now the atom tree is also important because we know it was part of Frankie's dream to create the Ship of Dreams with the same wood of the treasure tree similar to Tom who created the Oro Jackson Goldie Roger ship. What's interesting is that the word Oro translates to gold, a reference to both the treasure tree and also Goldie Roger, the golden man, and Oda loves this wordplay with Goldie Roger. He found the golden city of Shandora, and he even does the joke where the government changes his name from Goldie to Gold. So it's very fitting that Luffy and Roger both get their ships created from the wood of the treasure tree, since Roger also found the treasure at Laugh Tale, and Luffy will be the one to find the One Piece one day and carry on Joy Boy and Roger's will. As you can see, there's already a ton of interesting information here, but what I also think is cool is how the legend of the atom tree is that it withstands all these brutal wars. And since we just got talking about the war during the Void Century, it makes you wonder, what if the atom tree somehow survived the apocalyptic destruction of the Void Century? I believe the atom tree is located in Elbaf, and this is because Elbaf is the war land. So the atom tree being from a war-torn place fits that description perfectly. The Elbaf giants are known as warriors, and we even saw Dory and Brogy fight for hundreds of years. Fighting war seems to be heavily ingrained into Elbaf giant culture. I mean, even this little giant kid here in chapter 1076 looks so excited at the mere thought that there might be an invader bringing war to Elbaf. I mean, just think about how massive the Sunlight Eve tree is. And so, of course, an atom tree being a giant tree fits perfectly with a land of giants. When we finally see Elbaf during Big Mom's flashback in the anime, we see this absolutely colossal tree. And similar to Fishman Island's tree, what if the treasure tree atom has a big impact on the culture and geography of the land of Elbaf itself? As Frankie said, people gather around the atom tree and create nations, key word here being nations as plural, and one of these nations is of course Elbaf. Just like the fishermen built Fishman Island's kingdom around the Sunlight Eve tree. But what if I told you that Elbaf was only one of the many nations inside of the entire Warland area, which literally branches off into many other locations and islands surrounding the tree's branches, similar to how we speculated with Sabaody Archipelago and Marijoa. Now we finally have arrived at Elbaf at the time that I'm recording this part of the video, but I've been working on this theory for the last 6 to 7 months. That means 6 to 7 months before we got to Elbaf. And I was so excited because I did actually predict that Yggdrasil would be involved with Elbaf. And so the next part of this theory was going to be about how Yggdrasil was the atom tree. And in the first chapter that we arrive at Elbaf, Yggdrasil is mentioned. So what exactly is Yggdrasil? Yggdrasil is a giant tree from Norse mythology. And if you don't know, the way that Yggdrasil was described, it was a giant sacred tree at the
center of the 9 Norse realms. Its branches and roots would extend into each different realm. So what if the Adam tree was inspired by Yggdrasil in a way where Elbaf is only one of the 9 realms of Norse mythology? Or maybe Elbaf has 9 different realms that combine to create Elbaf. For example, similar to how the Holy Land of Marisua might be the top of the Eve tree, we could see a parallel where we have another godly land at the very top of the Adam tree, the land of the Aesir gods in Norse mythology being Asgard. And this might be where we even see characters like Loki, because in Norse mythology, Loki was a giant and also a god, and that fits perfectly here with Elbaf, a land of giants and gods. This would also lead to other cool ideas, like having some branches of this giant tree extend into the White Sea, which could be one of the alternate ways to get to the Sky Islands like Skypiea. Because remember, Gonfall mentioned that Roger and Luffy used the knock upstream as the most dangerous way, but there are also different ways to get to Skypiea. This would make Asgard, or the god realm of Elbaf, another Sky Island, and I really do hope that we get to see another Sky Island in the post-time skip era of One Piece. We got a little glimpse of it with Egghead, but I want a true Sky Island adventure. You know, for as much criticism as I have for the Skypiea arc, the concept of Skypiea was really so cool, and tying it to an arc like Elbaf would make this Sky Island a lot cooler than Skypiea. It's kind of crazy because there's an entire explored sea above the One Piece world, and that's what makes Skypiea feel like almost filler at times, since it feels like what happened in Skypiea stays in Skypiea. Zoro didn't even mention Skypiea when he fought King, who was a winged race person. It feels like Skypiea has almost been forgotten by Oda, but with Egghead we finally have a bit of hope. It seems the Sky Islands will be important moving forward, and I think there's even evidence that Skypiea could be connected to Elbaf already in the story. If you look back at the old map of Skypiea, we could see what appeared to be an Oni or a giant. This could be a hint that Elbaf's Adam tree could be the link between the people of the sky and the giants. Remember, there's also a giant beanstalk that stretches up from the top part of Skypiea, which is a reference to Jack and the Beanstalk story, a story with a giant. And when you think of giant snakes in Skypiea, which were worshipped as gods just like in Elbaf, this could be a reference to the world serpent Jormungandr, a giant serpent of the Nordic realms. Yeah, I don't think that giant god snake is a coincidence. So the Sunlight Eve tree reaching towards the bottom of the depths of the ocean. The opposite would be the Adam tree reaching towards the sky. The Adam tree being a tree that begins on land, and in Elbaf reaching up all the way to the White Sea, it does seem like a perfect inversion. And the Adam tree shooting up so high past multiple Sky Islands would also be really cool to see, because at some point we could even see the Straw Hats climbing up the tree with the giants. And if that tree is really what connects the Sky Islands, you can now understand why the Elbaf giants also worship the sun, which could be another key tying them back to Nika and the ancient kingdom of the sun. And if there are Sky Islands connected to Elbaf, that would also explain how Vegapunk came up with the inspiration to create the Sky Island clouds in the first place for Egghead, because we know that Vegapunk has made secret visits to Elbaf for his own research. Remember that Frankie said specifically they'd rain cannonballs from the sky and the tree would still stand tall, which could be huge evidence of Sky Islands at the top of the Adam tree in Elbaf, as there could be a war where the people above are fighting against the people below, kind of how we saw Enel do this to humans below. Or once again, as I mentioned earlier, it could be a hint of the ancient wars of the Void Century, where Mother Flame-like weapons shot down at the Adam tree from the sky. I really do think that Elbaf had a huge pivotal role in the Void Century War, and I'm not fully convinced that all of the people of Elbaf took one side. With a land of warriors and a war land, and 9 realms possibly being tied to this land, this leads to many different possible alliances, some people teaming up with Joy Boy, some people teaming up with the 20 Kings Alliance, and then other unknown factions that also teamed up with other Elbaf warriors. Another question about the Adam tree is that, what if the poneglyphs are connected to the Adam tree, as they both fit the description as indestructible? And paralleling Skypiea again, this also reminds me of chapter 272 during Skypiea, where Robin theorizes that long ago there was a war which resulted in the ruins of Shandora, after the people of Shandora died protecting the poneglyph and its history in the midst of its prosperity. Remember that Frankie probably also knows everything that he knows about the Adam tree from Tom, and Tom knew many secrets of the world that were passed down from the legendary Water 7 shipwrights that created with Pluton, and similar to Cobra learning things from Lily's letter being passed down from the Void Century as well. Tom was close with Roger and even knew of the ancient weapons, so is it possible that the war that Frankie speaks of in the story of the Atom Tree and the war that Robin talks about with Shandor are the same war? Maybe they're both tied to the Void Century War. And I came up with this theory even before chapter 1108, but in this chapter we received even more evidence for this theory that the Atom Tree and Elbaf are connected to the Sky Islands. When the Giants arrive at Egghead, they show us that they are aware of the existence of Sky Islands. This could be simply from the same way that Kuma and Bonnie learned of Sky Islands, but what if they are so casual about Sky Islands because there is a Sky Island right above them named Asgard? Or maybe there's multiple different Sky Islands from these different branches of the top of the Yggdrasil tree. And so if the Eve Tree sunlight connection is something so tangible and literal as the tree that creates sunlight, what does this mean for the treasure tree? This makes me think that the treasure is a literal connection the same way, and I've come up with a few different theories as to how this ties in. Earlier I mentioned how the Atom Tree may be geologically connected to a city of gold or treasure, and now that I've explained how Yggdrasil being Atom would look, we can see how it's very possible that there's a very secret land of gold hidden somewhere within the 9 realms. Maybe there was a Sky Island paralleling Skypiea and Shandora's city of gold. If you enjoyed this video, it took so much hard work and time to make. I've been working on this for like 9 months, so please leave a like. And if you want to learn more about what went down during the Void Century and how the Ancient Kingdom vanished, I have the answers. Just check out this video where I discovered Oda's secret inspiration for the Void Century and for the entire story of One Piece.